Now we'll take a look at the factory design pattern, which is a very useful one, and here's the problem it's meant to solve. Let's see, for example, you're creating code and you start off by creating a connection object to an Oracle database. And so there you are, you have created inside your code a connection object, which is a new Oracle connection. Then some of your data turns out to be served on a SQL server, and so you have, instead of Oracle, so you have a SQL server connection object you also need to deal with. So in your code, you might have to start using SQL server connection objects like this, as you see here, SQL server, and then you can create connection objects that way. And then it turns out some of your data is also saved in MySQL server connections. And so you've got to start creating some places in your code, MySQL server connection objects like this, and it's starting to get a little bit diffuse, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to start creating, let's say, secure connections to these various databases as well, and then it's all getting to be pretty diffuse code. So you start coding like this. You start saying if type equals Oracle, and you get an Oracle connection. If type equals SQL Server, you get a SQL Server connection, otherwise a MySQL connection. And then you realize you're going to have to start putting this many places in your code to create these different kind of connections. So it's time maybe to create a method. And this method is a create connection method, and you pass it the type of connection you want, and it passes you back a connection object. So that might look something like this. You say create connection, and you pass it a type. If the type equals Oracle, you return an Oracle connection. If the type equals SQL Server, you pass it a SQL Server connection. If the type is otherwise, use MySQL as a default. And that's fine up to a certain point, but then you realize that you are changing your core code a lot, and you have to change this create connection method a lot and modify it and so forth. And so one of the major points about design patterns is that you should not have to modify your core code frequently. So the factory design pattern says you should be able to remove your core code that changes a lot and put it into a factory, as we're going to see how that works. So the idea here is you have been creating connections, and as more connection types appear, you have to modify your core code frequently in order to handle those. What we're going to do now is we're going to see how factory objects let you keep your core code the same and just create objects using what's called a factory design pattern. So that's coming up next.